We're looking at the back of the QL1, 16 inputs, they're mic preamplifiers, and we have 8 outputs. They are line level outputs. We also have Dante, primary and secondary. Here's what we're going to go through as quickly as we can to try and get some sound from an input to an output. And if you look at the top of this table, you can straight away get sound from an input to an output just by selecting the stereo or mono bus on an input, and if the stereo and mono bus is routed to an omni output, you get sound. Here's a view of an input, happens to be input number 1, and you can confirm that by looking in the top right hand corner. That is the page that you're dealing with at the moment. You can take your input 1 and send it straight to the stereo bus or to the mono bus, or both. So that's covered the first line in our table here. We've gone from input to the stereo or mono bus. Additionally, we can go to the mix and we can go to the matrix. Here we are with our input on the top right hand corner. We happen to have channel 1, and over on the left we have the mix tab highlighted. If you look down from top to bottom on the mix tab, there are 16 mixes. Over on the matrix tab, there are 8 matrices. If you're just setting up the most simple PA, you just need microphone to go to your speakers, either on the stereo or the mono output. You don't need mixes. You've got sound coming out straight away. For more control, you would run your microphone inputs through a mix rather than going directly to a stereo or mono output. If we were to look at an analog mixer, looking down the channel strip on the left hand side, it is very similar to a digital mixer. This image is just of the first 2 channels on an analog mixer. From the top going down we have phantom power, the pad, which will turn a mic pre into a line input, gain control, high pass filter, which means it passes all the sounds above the bass. High pass filters are used for getting rid of that rumble in the bass when people touch a microphone stand or walk along a stage. If the really low sounds are not required, then you engage the high pass filter to remove those sounds and make the sound clearer. Next, running down the strip on this example analog mixer is a high frequency EQ, a sweepable high mid EQ, otherwise known as a parametric, a sweepable low mid EQ, another band of parametric, and a low frequency EQ. The last switch under all those is the EQ in, which turns the EQ on and off. Returning to those first 2 channels on the analog mixer, we have the bottom half where we have our sends. The first 4 auxiliary sends or mixers are grouped together, numbered 1 to 4. Underneath that group there is a switch where you can select pre-fader or post-fader. If you select pre-fader, it means the fader at the bottom of the channel strip has no effect on those volumes. Whatever volume you set on those dials is always on, it's always going out to wherever you send it. An example of that would be foldback monitors on a band, where you don't want their levels to change once you have set them during sound check. You want to keep them fairly close between every song. After you've set your foldback monitor levels, when you mix the band for the front of house for your audience, you want to be able to control those levels from the fader up and down for every song and potentially turn off certain channels between songs. With those auxiliaries set to pre-fade, you still have control of your fader for the front of house at the bottom. The next set of auxiliaries, auxiliary 5 and 6, is the same again. Now you might want to set them post-fade if you were doing a recording. That way, every time you pull down your main fader, it also takes it from those auxiliaries because they are set to get their signal after the fader, being post-fade. Returning to the QL1, you can see the default setting above the mix sends or your auxiliary sends as they appeared on the analog desk says pre-fade. It is assumed that most of the time you want to set up your auxiliaries to be on all the time with sound going to them no matter what position you have your fader in. If you're setting up audio recordings or camera sends or online seminar, anything where you need absolute control of the microphones the whole time. You do not want these in pre-fade. If they are in pre-fade, everything that's on the microphone, whether the person is on stage or in a green room, as soon as that microphone is turned on, the sounds that are on pre-fade go to the recording, go to the cameras, go down the live stream, and everyone can hear what's happening on that microphone as well as what's happening on stage. It is very important to turn these off pre-fade and make them all post-fade, so that when you turn down your fader, nothing is going from the microphones out to all your sends. Unless, of course, you're sending foldback monitors to a band. If we quickly look back at the analog desk, we can see those pre and post fader switches are integrated in the channel strip, and they have equal importance as everything else on that channel strip. A challenge with the QL1 is being able to find how to take the sends, the mixes, out of pre-fade and put them all into post-fade. There are many menus, many buttons, both physical and virtual on a QL1. However, none of those will allow you to take the sends out of pre-fade and put them in post-fade. There is one trick for taking sends out of pre-fade, and it is the only way you can get to the pre-fade options. That is by double tapping on the virtual fader, which controls the level of send on each of the 16 mixes. Timing has to be precise on the double tap. Eventually, you'll get a pop-up screen which will allow you to take the mixes out of pre-fade and put them into post-fade, so that the fader has absolute control over where those sounds go at any time. We've covered the input going to a stereo or mono bus by clicking on the stereo or mono button. We've also covered sending an input to a mix or to a matrix. Returning to our table, in the middle we have the next part of our signal path, which is sending a stereo or mono bus either to an Omni or Dante output. So there is 8 Omni outputs, or however the Dante is configured, typically 32 potential Dante channels. And the way we would send the stereo or mono bus to the Omni or Dante outputs is we would select the mix. In this case, in the top right, the stereo left is selected, and in the middle of the output screen there is a patch. You can click on the patch routing and send it to multiple destinations from the patch. You can also send your stereo or mono bus to the matrix. So again, on the right hand side in the top right hand corner, what we have selected is the stereo left, and over on the left we have the matrix options, and you dial in the amount that you want to send to each matrix. Mixes can also be sent to outputs or to matrices. So in the top right hand corner you could have a mix selected there and patch a mix directly to an output or Dante. And just like with your stereo bus, you could select a mix and send that mix to a matrix, any one of the 8 matrices at any level. Finally, at the end of the table here, we just have matrices, and matrices can only go to one place. That is an output. So if you had your matrix selected in the top right hand corner here, you could only patch a matrix to an output. You may be wondering if you can get stereo out of the mixer to your PA system just using the stereo bus, and you can get all your foldback speakers out just using the mixers. Why would you want to use a matrix? A matrix is often used for distributing the sound into different locations. One common way of setting up the matrix is to have your first 2 matrices being your left and right from the stereo signal. The third matrix would be your front fill row of speakers, so that you have individual volume control of that independent of your front of house. And the fourth might be your subwoofer sends. That way you can bring your left and right fader up and down and have control over your whole house system once you've set up your individual matrices at the levels which are balanced. That concludes a quick run through of getting sound into and out of a QL1. Do your own research, find out from as many sources as you can, and build your knowledge from there.